After feasting on an outrage festival this weekend, MAGA World is now hungry for a new controversy, and they just got one. America's most right-wing Catholic cardinal, Timothy Dolan of New York, is soon going to be 86th by America's first pope, Pope Leo. And as is typical, most of MAGA World's outrage over this is unfounded and misdirected. But hey, when did MAGA World ever let the facts get in the way? MAGA World was already looking for a fight over the Pope's unwillingness to participate in the fawning over Charlie Kirk that they expect from every public figure. Pope Leo decidedly avoided talking about the murder in public. The Vatican's press office released a statement saying that the Pope is holding Charlie Kirk and his family in prayer, and that the Pope expressed concern about political violence. But Leo's designed reticence to speak glowingly of Charlie Kirk was lost on Cardinal Dolan, who outraged the Catholic world by showing up on Fox and Friends and comparing Kirk to St. Paul. Catholics from across the pews were outraged, but Dolan's comments were typical for a cardinal whose mission in life was to undermine Pope Francis at every opportunity that he could. Ironically, the gospel reading in every Catholic church this Sunday was a passage in which Jesus tells his followers that you can't serve two masters. And for Dolan, serving the right-wing cause has always been his master. That Dolan could speak so glowingly about a guy who demeans both Catholic theology and the Pope goes to show you which master Dolan serves. Watch this.
I believe that there are personally some fundamental issues with, like I say, Mariology, transubstantiation, which we're not going to get into. But the biggest one is the papacy. I can't get over the idea of this Marxist who calls himself the head of your church being a representation of Christ our Lord. I mean that as someone who loves the Catholic impact on the world, that says it openly, and the fruit you will know it, and you have very Marxist fruit.
This is the man that Dolan speaks so glowingly about. So sure, you could make the case that before his conversion, Saul of Tarsus used to love watching his opponents being put to death, something that Charlie Kirk advocated for. But other than that, these two had nothing in common. But there's Dolan on Fox contributing to the fascist canonization of Kirk. And this is precisely the kind of behavior that popes since John Paul II have been trying to tamp down on. Catholic clergy engaged in political movements. Pope Leo clearly agrees with this restriction. In an interview with American Catholic journalist Elise Allen, Pope Leo had this to say about American politics and the church. President Trump made a statement last week about how he didn't have it on his agenda to want to meet with me. And then he said, but his brother's a nice guy, and that's fine. One of my brothers has met him and has been very outspoken about his political viewpoints. But if or when there were specific issues that, if it were possible to engage with him, I would have no problem doing so. So, for those not trained in Catholic homiletics, let me translate. The Pope said, yes, like almost everyone, I have a crazy relative who's a Trumper, and Trump tried to cash in on that. But I won't hesitate to speak out against Trump if he crosses the line. And then Leo clarified what he meant by saying, something that Francis did towards the end of his pontificate, which I think was very significant, was the letter he wrote about the issue of the treatment of immigrants. I was very happy to see how the American bishops picked that up, and some of them were courageous enough to go with that. Translation, the Catholic Church stays out of politics until you cross the line and go after the poor, the marginalized, and other vulnerable people, and then we'll oppose you loudly. Dolan could not have been more at cross purposes with Leo, and he knows it. But there's a reason why Dolan is making media appearances and trying to become a hero for the right wing. Dolan is soon going to be out of a job. Unlike the U.S. Supreme Court, the Catholic Church has a mandatory retirement age for cardinals, and Dolan just reached that age. What has MAGA World outraged is that Dolan issued his resignation letter and the Pope accepted it. The biggest mistake Francis made in his papacy was not transferring Dolan out of New York and into Liechtenstein. or an important Vatican position like the dicastery for pigeon population control, where he could encourage the birds to take up natural family planning. Pope Leo is not making that mistake. He has Dolan's resignation, and he's going to run with it. And that's why MAGA world is so upset. Over the last couple of decades, the right wing has grown comfortable with Catholic bishops openly supporting the Republican Party with a nudge nudge, wink wink. After Francis's papacy, however, the number of right-wing cardinals and bishops in the U.S. is shrinking dramatically. Now they're going to be down one more. There's no doubt but that Dolan will continue to dog Pope Leo by being out there on the public circuit. For sure he'll be on Fox News regularly, but he'll be out of power and out of access. He'll just be a humble clergyman. Well, 1 out of 2 is not bad. I'm Anthony Vincent Gallo for Occupy Democrats.